Imagine this. On the luxurious Orient Express racing from Paris to Zurich, the brilliant detective Hercule Poirot boards for a routine journey. But amid opulent dinners and whispered secrets, a wealthy Swiss baron is found poisoned in his compartment, clutching a deadly vial. Suspects abound: a jealous wife with hidden affairs, a bankrupt industrialist seeking revenge, a spurned heiress, a shadowy doctor versed in toxins, and a vengeful relative from the past. As the train hurtles through the Alps, Poirot unravels a web of motives: blackmail, betrayal, and buried grudges. Twists emerge in dark tunnels, false alibis, planted clues, a suicide pact gone wrong. In Zurich's Grand Station, Poirot reveals the cunning killer, driven by greed and freedom, a classic whodunit of deception and justice. Will you guess the murderer before the final stop? Chapter 1. The Departure from Paris. The autumn air in Paris carried a crisp edge that evening in 1932 as Hercule Poirot made his way along the bustling platform of the Gare de l'Est. The Orient Express, that epitome of opulent travel, stood waiting like a slumbering dragon of polished steel and gleaming brass. Its cars, adorned with intricate woodwork and gold accents, promised a journey of unparalleled comfort through the heart of Europe to Zurich. Poirot, attired in his customary neat black suit, with a coat draped over one arm and his silver-topped cane in hand, paused to admire the train's elegance. "Ah, the Orient Express," he murmured to himself, "a symphony of precision and luxury. It is most satisfactory." He presented his ticket to the uniformed conductor, a man with a stern mustache and an air of unyielding efficiency, who bowed slightly and directed him to his first-class compartment. As Poirot settled into the plush seat, arranging his few belongings with meticulous care, a small valise, a book of philosophy, and his favorite tisane herbs, he allowed his keen eyes to wander. The detective's mind, ever active, delighted in the observation of human nature, and this voyage offered a rich tableau. Through the window he watched the other passengers arriving, each one a potential study in character. First came Baron Heinrich von Kessler, a towering figure in his 50s, with a broad forehead furrowed by years of financial intrigue and a beard trimmed to Teutonic perfection. He barked orders at the porters handling his numerous trunks, his voice resonant with authority. At his side glided his wife, Lady Isabella, a vision of refined beauty in her early 30s. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she wore a fur-trimmed coat that whispered of old money. Around her neck sparkled a necklace of sapphires, each stone catching the fading light like a captive ocean wave. Yet Poirot noted a certain detachment in her gaze, as if she moved through the world at a remove, her thoughts elsewhere. Next boarded Dr. Elias Moreau, a slender Frenchman with wire-rimmed spectacles and a neatly clipped goatee. He carried a leather medical bag that seemed heavier than necessary, clutching it close as he navigated the platform. His steps were deliberate, almost hesitant, and Poirot wondered at the faint tremor in his hands, nerves perhaps, or the residue of some inner conflict. The doctor nodded politely to the Baron and his lady, exchanging a brief word that Poirot could not hear, but the familiarity suggested prior acquaintance. Then appeared Miss Clara Beaumont, the vivacious American heiress, her laughter preceding her like a herald. She was a striking young woman in her 20s, with bobbed blonde hair and a dress of the latest Parisian fashion, bold in its cut and color. She chatted animatedly with a fellow traveler, her accent a lively contrast to the subdued European tones around her. "Oh, this train is simply divine," she exclaimed, tossing her head. "I've heard the dining car serves the most exquisite foie gras." Trailing her was Reginald Thorpe, a burly British industrialist whose ruddy face spoke of hearty meals and boardroom battles. His suit strained at the seams, and he mopped his brow with a handkerchief, grumbling about the continental weather. Poirot caught a snippet of their conversation. Something about investments gone awry. Thorpe's tone edged with frustration. Last to board, almost slipping aboard unnoticed, was Victor Lang, a gaunt man from Eastern Europe with hollow cheeks and eyes that darted restlessly. His overcoat was threadbare, a stark counterpoint to the opulence surrounding him, and he carried only a small satchel. He avoided eye contact, slipping into the shadows of the entrance car as if pursued by unseen phantoms. As the final whistles blew and the train lurched forward with a gentle sigh of steam, Poirot leaned back, savoring the smooth acceleration. The city lights of Paris began to recede, giving way to the darkening countryside. In the corridor outside, he heard the murmur of voices, the Baron's deep timbre, Lady Isabella's soft reply, Miss Beaumont's bright chatter. The detective smiled faintly, twisting the ends of his magnificent mustache. Little did he know that beneath this veneer of civility, threads of envy, deceit, and deadly intent were already weaving themselves into a tapestry of murder. The wheels clicked rhythmically over the tracks, a lullaby that masked the gathering storm. Poirot reached for his tisane, content for the moment in the illusion of tranquility. Chapter 2. Whispers in the night, as the Orient Express hurtled through the encroaching twilight, leaving the outskirts of Paris far behind, the passengers began to converge on the dining car. The compartment, resplendent with crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, golden glow over starched white tablecloths and polished silverware, exuded an air of refined serenity. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided silently between the tables, bearing trays laden with delicacies, escargots in garlic butter, consommé royal, and promises of roast quail to follow. Yet beneath this facade of elegance, Hercule Poirot sensed the subtle vibrations of unease, like the faint tremor of a violin string plucked in a distant room. Poirot had chosen a table near the center, affording him an unobstructed view of the car's occupants. He adjusted his napkin with precision, his small, neat hands moving with the deliberation of a craftsman. One observes much at dinner, he reflected silently, for hunger loosens tongues and wine unveils secrets. The detective's egg-shaped head tilted slightly as he surveyed the room, his cat-like green eyes missing nothing. Baron Heinrich von Kessler entered first, his imposing frame filling the doorway. He escorted Lady Isabella with a possessive grip on her arm, guiding her to a table adorned with a single red rose in a crystal vase. The Baron pulled out her chair with a flourish, but Poirot noted the lady's slight wince, as if the gesture carried an undercurrent of control rather than courtesy. She seated herself gracefully, her sapphire necklace shimmering under the lights, drawing envious glances from nearby diners. The Baron signaled imperiously for the wine list, his voice booming, as he consulted with the sommelier. "A Burgundy, the finest you have. Nothing less for such a journey." Seated at an adjacent table was Dr. Elias Moreau, who had arrived early and was already perusing a medical journal, his spectacles perched on the bridge of his nose. He looked up as the Kesslers settled in, and for a fleeting moment, his gaze lingered on Lady Isabella. It was a look not of casual admiration, but of something deeper, familiarity, perhaps, or shared complicity. She met his eyes briefly, her lips curving into a smile that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of polite indifference. The doctor fidgeted with the clasp of his medical bag, which he had placed conspicuously on the chair beside him, as though it were a talisman against intrusion. Miss Clara Beaumont made her entrance with the flair of a stage actress, her heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. She wore a gown of emerald silk that accentuated her lithe figure, and her laughter rang out like silver bells as she approached Reginald Thorpe, who lumbered in behind her. Thorpe, his face flushed from the warmth of the car or perhaps from a pre-dinner aperitif, offered his arm with a gruff chuckle. "Miss Beaumont, you light up this dreary train like a Broadway marquee." She accepted with a playful curtsy, and they took seats across from Poirot, affording the detective an ideal vantage point. "Monsieur Poirot, is it not?" Miss Beaumont addressed him directly, her American accent cutting through the murmur of conversations. "I've heard tales of your exploits, solving murders in drawing rooms. How thrilling! Do tell us, what brings a famous detective to Zurich?" Poirot inclined his head modestly, twisting the ends of his mustache. "Ah, mademoiselle, even detectives must travel, for pleasure occasionally. Zurich calls with its banks and its chocolates, non? But you, with your vitality, surely seek adventure beyond the mundane?" She laughed again, a sound that drew smiles from the waiters. "Adventure? Why, this train is adventure enough, though I confess, Europe feels so constrained after New York. All these old titles and fortunes, it's like stepping into a novel." Her eyes flicked toward the Kesslers, and Poirot detected a shadow in her expression, a momentary tightening of her jaw. Was it envy of the lady's jewels, or something more personal? Thorpe, meanwhile, had engaged the Baron in conversation across the aisle, his voice carrying with the bluff heartiness of an Englishman abroad. "Von Kessler, old chap, heard about that merger in steel? Your bank's fingerprints all over it, I wager." The Baron's response was measured, his German accent clipped. "Mergers come and go, Thorpe, but investments, those require vision. Yours, I recall, lacked it in the Vienna affair." Thorpe's ruddy cheeks deepened in color, and he forced a laugh that rang hollow. "Water under the bridge, eh? Though it cost me a pretty penny." The exchange ended abruptly as the first course arrived, but Poirot filed away the tension, noting how Thorpe's hand clenched around his fork. Victor Lang slunk into the dining car last, choosing a solitary table at the far end, near the swaying curtains that framed the darkening landscape outside. His threadbare coat hung loosely on his thin frame, and he ordered only a simple soup, his eyes fixed on the window as if the passing fields held answers to unspoken questions. Poirot, ever curious about the outliers, excused himself briefly from Miss Beaumont's lively discourse and approached Lang's table under the pretense of retrieving a misplaced napkin. "Monsieur," Poirot began amiably, "you travel alone? The night deepens and company can lighten the journey." Lang looked up sharply, his dark eyes wary, like those of a fox sensing a trap. "Company? In my experience, it brings only complications. I am Victor Lang from Budapest, though that means little here." His voice was low, laced with a bitterness that intrigued Poirot. "Budapest, a city of bridges and histories," Poirot replied smoothly. And you, monsieur, seem burdened by one such history. Is it the destination that troubles you, or the path? Lang's lips thinned. Troubles are my constant companions, detective, but they are private. Enjoy your meal. He turned away, effectively ending the exchange, but not before Poirot glimpsed a faded photograph tucked into his wallet. A family portrait, perhaps, worn from frequent handling. Returning to his seat, Poirot pondered the mosaic of interactions. Miss Beaumont had shifted her attention to Dr. Moreau, inquiring about his specialty. Poisons, you say? How macabre. Though I suppose in medicine one must know the enemy. The doctor smiled faintly, adjusting his spectacles. Indeed, mademoiselle, poisons are but tools. Life or death depends on the hand that wields them. Lady Isabella, overhearing, glanced their way again, her fingers toying with her necklace in a gesture that seemed absent-minded, but struck Poirot as deliberate. As the main course was served, tender quail in a rich sauce, accompanied by asparagus and potatoes dauphinoise, the conversations ebbed and flowed. Thorpe regaled the table with tales of his factories in Manchester, but his boasts carried an undertone of desperation, as if seeking validation. The Baron, ever the financier, interjected with pointed questions about profits and losses, each one a subtle jab that left Thorpe shifting uncomfortably. Poirot, savoring his meal with small, appreciative bites, engaged Miss Beaumont further. "You know the Baron well, mademoiselle?" he inquired casually. Her fork paused mid-air. "Know him? Oh, scarcely. We crossed paths in society once or twice. He's ambitious." The word hung in the air, laden with implication. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the hesitation. Later, as coffee was poured and liqueurs offered, the group dispersed gradually. The Baron and his lady retired first, her hand on his arm once more, though Poirot observed her steps falter slightly, as if weary from the performance. Dr. Moreau followed, his bag in tow, pausing to bid good night to Miss Beaumont with a bow that lingered a fraction too long. Thorpe lingered over a cigar, his eyes following the Kesslers with a brooding intensity. Miss Beaumont excused herself with a yawn, declaring the hour late for American constitutions. Poirot remained, sipping his tisane as the dining car emptied. The train's rhythm had become a soothing cadence, the French countryside now shrouded in full night, stars pricking the velvet sky. Yet the whispers he had overheard, fragments of arguments, veiled glances, unspoken grievances, lingered like smoke. The night conceals much, he mused, but the little gray cells, they pierce the darkness. In the corridor, as he made his way back to his compartment, Poirot heard a muffled voice from behind a door. Thorpe's, perhaps, raised in quiet fury, and from another a soft sob that could have been Lady Isabella's. Victor Lang's light remained on, a solitary glow in the dimness. The Alps awaited in the distance, their peaks invisible but inevitable. Poirot locked his door, arranging his pillows with care. Sleep came slowly, interrupted by the train's occasional whistle, a harbinger of the revelations to come. Little did the passengers know that the whispers of this night were but preludes to a symphony of deceit, where every glance and word would be scrutinized under the unrelenting gaze of justice. Chapter 3. The Silent Scream. The first faint rays of dawn pierced the curtains of the Orient Express as it crossed into Swiss territory, the landscape transforming from the flat fields of France to the rugged foothills of the Alps. Snow-dusted peaks loomed in the distance, their majestic, forms a stark contrast to the confined world within the train's luxurious confines. Hercule Poirot, ever an early riser, had already completed his meticulous morning ablutions, shaving with precision, arranging his toiletries in symmetrical order, and donning a fresh suit of impeccable cut. He stepped into the corridor, intending to partake of a light breakfast in the dining car, when a sudden commotion shattered the tranquil rhythm of the journey. A piercing cry echoed from the direction of the first-class sleeping cars, a sound raw and primal, cutting through the muffled clatter of wheels on tracks. It was the voice of the Baron's steward, a young Swiss lad named Fritz, whose face, when Poirot arrived at the scene, was ashen with horror. "Herr Baron! Oh Gott im Himmel!" Fritz stammered, his hands trembling as he pointed toward compartment 7. Poirot, his senses alert, pushed past the gathering crowd of porters and early-rising passengers. The door to the compartment stood ajar, revealing a scene of frozen tragedy. Baron Heinrich von Kessler lay sprawled across his berth, his massive frame twisted in an unnatural pose, as if caught in the throes of a final, desperate struggle. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, wide with unspoken terror, and his lips were drawn back in a grimace that bespoke agony. Clutched in his right hand was a small glass vial, empty but for a few lingering drops of a colorless liquid that gleamed ominously in the morning light. The air held a faint, acrid scent, like bitter almonds, that Poirot recognized immediately. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. He knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the scene, his gloved fingers hovering but not touching. The Baron's skin was cold, rigor mortis just beginning to set in, suggesting death had occurred several hours earlier, perhaps in the dead of night. No visible wounds marred the corpse, no signs of violence save for the contorted features. Poirot's gray cells whirred into action, cataloging every detail. The rumpled bedclothes, a half-empty water glass on the nightstand. The Baron's watch stopped at 2:17 a.m. Its crystal cracked as if struck in a spasm. The conductor, Herr Miller, a burly man with a face like weathered granite, arrived breathless, his uniform askew from haste. "What is this? Murder on my train?" he bellowed, his Swiss accent thick with indignation. He ordered the door sealed and the passengers confined to their compartments until further notice. The train's remote location, winding through a narrow valley with no stations in sight, meant that police from the nearest town would not arrive for hours, if not longer, due to the mountainous terrain and early hour. Word of the tragedy spread like wildfire through the cars, drawing the other suspects to the corridor despite Miller's commands. Lady Isabella von Kessler, her face pale beneath a hasty application of rouge, clutched a silk robe around her slender form. "Heinrich? No, it cannot be," she murmured, her voice breaking as she attempted to push forward. Fritz restrained her gently, his own eyes brimming with tears. Dr. Elias Moreau, summoned by the conductor, entered the compartment with his medical bag. He examined the body briefly, his hands steady, but his brow furrowed. "Cyanide poisoning, without doubt," he pronounced, pointing to the blue tinge around the Baron's lips and nails. "The smell confirms it. Prussic acid. Death would have been swift, but excruciating." Poirot nodded, noting how the doctor's diagnosis came almost too readily, as if prepared. Miss Clara Beaumont appeared next, her bobbed hair disheveled, a shawl thrown over her nightgown. "Poison? On a train like this, it's like something out of a dime novel. Her tone aimed for lightness, but her eyes darted nervously, betraying inner turmoil. Reginald Thorpe, rumpled and red-eyed, perhaps from lack of sleep or excess brandy, loomed behind her. "Damned inconvenient," he muttered, then caught himself. "I mean, poor fellow, we had our differences, but this—" Victor Lang hovered at the periphery, his gaunt features impassive, though Poirot detected a flicker of satisfaction in his shadowed eyes. "The mighty fall," Lang said softly, almost to himself, before turning away. Herr Müller, regaining composure, turned to Poirot. "Monsieur, your reputation as a detective is known even in Switzerland. Until the authorities arrive, I beg you to take charge. We cannot have chaos aboard." Poirot straightened, his mustache quivering with purpose. "Very well, monsieur. Hercule Poirot accepts. But all must cooperate. The murderer walks among us, and the truth will not hide forever." He directed the steward to guard the door and began his preliminary inquiries, starting with Fritz. The young man, still shaken, recounted his discovery. "I brought the Baron's morning coffee at 6, as always. Knocked, no answer. Entered with my key. Found him like that. He was fine last night. Retired around 11 after arguing with Herr Thorpe in the lounge." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Arguing? About what?" "Money, I think. The Baron said something about ruined prospects." Herr Thorpe stormed off. Next, Lady Isabella, seated in the adjacent lounge car under Müller's watchful eye, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "We dined together, then retired separately, his compartment and mine. He complained of indigestion, took his tonic as usual." She gestured vaguely toward the vial. "That must be it, but who would tamper with it?" Poirot pressed gently. "Enemies, madame? Your husband was a man of power." She hesitated, her fingers twisting the fabric. "Banking rivals, perhaps, or old grudges from the war. But here, on this train." Dr. Moreau, when questioned, confirmed prescribing the tonic for the Baron's heart condition. "Harmless. Digitalis and herbs. No cyanide. I keep my poisons locked in my bag for research purposes only." Yet Poirot noted the doctor's evasive glance toward Lady Isabella, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. Miss Beaumont admitted to a sleepless night. "I heard footsteps around midnight, pacing the corridor. Thought it was the conductor." Thorpe grunted agreement, claiming he had been in his compartment, nursing a headache with whiskey. "Saw no one, heard nothing unusual." Lang, cornered in his seat, offered little. "I slept poorly, as always. The Baron? His death surprises me not. Men like him collect debts in blood." As the morning wore on, the train chugged relentlessly toward Zurich, the scenery a blur of pines and mist-shrouded valleys. Poirot examined the compartment more thoroughly, discovering a key missing from the Baron's chain, perhaps used to lock the door from inside, simulating suicide. A smudged fingerprint on the vial, not the Baron's, hinted at foul play. Footprints in the thin carpet dust suggested a visitor had entered and exited stealthily. In the lounge, the suspects gathered uneasily, sipping coffee that tasted of ashes. Conversations were strained, accusations veiled. Thorpe eyed Moreau suspiciously. "You physicians and your poisons. Convenient, eh?" The doctor bristled. "And your financial woes? Desperation drives men to extremes." Lady Isabella interjected sharply. "Enough! Heinrich deserves respect." But her composure cracked, a tear escaping despite her efforts. Miss Beaumont, fidgeting with her glove, whispered to Poirot, "I saw the lady slip into his compartment late last night. Family matters," she said. Poirot absorbed it all, his mind a whirlwind of connections. The vial's label bore a pharmacy stamp from Paris, matching Moreau's prescription pad. A torn corner of a note under the berth read, "Payment due." Or else, in handwriting that resembled Thorpe's bold scrawl. As the train emerged from a tunnel, sunlight flooding the cars, Poirot stepped to the window, gazing at the approaching lakeside towns. The scream was silent, he mused aloud. But the clues shout, the web tightens. The suspects shifted, each harboring secrets that the detective's unyielding scrutiny would soon unravel. Zurich beckoned, but justice demanded answers here, amid the gilded rails that now carried a cargo of death and deception. Chapter 4. The Web of Motives. The lounge car of the Orient Express, with its velvet-upholstered seats and Art Deco lamps casting a subdued amber light, had transformed into an impromptu chamber of inquiry. Hercule Poirot, seated at a central table with a notepad before him, surveyed the assembled passengers like a conductor poised to unravel a discordant symphony. The train rattled onward through the Swiss valleys, the scenery outside a picturesque blur of chalets and fir trees dusted with early snow. But inside, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion. Herr Müller hovered nearby, ensuring order, while Fritz the steward served coffee with hands that still trembled from the morning's shock. Poirot began his interrogations with the method that had served him through countless cases: order, precision, and an unerring focus on the human psyche. "We commence with the motives," he announced in his precise, accented English, his voice carrying the authority of one who brooked no evasion. "For murder is not random. It springs from the heart's dark corners: greed, jealousy, revenge. Each of you, mes amis, must account for your connection to the late Baron von Kessler." He turned first to Lady Isabella, who sat composed on a divan, her hands folded in her lap, though her knuckles whitened with the effort. She had changed into a somber black dress, her sapphire necklace removed, as if in mourning. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "your husband was a man of wealth and influence. Who might wish him harm?" Lady Isabella's eyes, dark and luminous, met his steadily. Heinrich had rivals in Zurich's banking circles, men like Herr Grunwald, who lost fortunes in his deals, but none are aboard this train. She paused, her voice dropping. There were personal matters, debts from the past, perhaps. Poirot noted the hesitation, the way her gaze flickered toward Dr. Moreau, who stood by the window, ostensibly examining the passing landscape. Pressing further, Poirot inquired about the Baron's habits. "His tonic, did he take it alone?" "Always," she replied. "Though last night he seemed agitated after dinner. He mentioned a letter received in Paris, something troubling." Poirot made a note. No such letter had been found in the compartment. Next, Reginald Thorpe was summoned. The industrialist slumped into a chair opposite Poirot, his broad shoulders hunched, a cigar clenched unlit between his teeth. "What rot is this?" he blustered. "I barely knew the man beyond business." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, but business can be deadly, monsieur. Tell me of your disputes." Thorpe shifted uncomfortably, the chair creaking under his weight. "We had a venture in steel mills, Vienna, 2 years back. Kessler pulled out at the last, left me holding the bag. Cost me £50,000. His face reddened. "I confronted him last night in the lounge, yes, demanded restitution. He laughed, said I was a fool for trusting him." Thorpe's fist clenched. But poison? That's a coward's way. I'd have faced him man to man. Poirot nodded, filing away the admission. And your whereabouts after the argument? In my compartment, alone. Ask the steward. He brought me brandy around midnight. Fritz, overhearing, confirmed this with a nod, but Poirot wondered at the ease of bribery on such a train. Miss Clara Beaumont followed, perching on the edge of her seat like a bird ready to take flight. Her earlier vivacity had dimmed, replaced by a calculated charm. Monsieur Poirot, this is dreadful. I hardly knew the Baron. Met him at a soirée in Monte Carlo last season. Hardly knew? Poirot echoed, his tone mild but probing. Yet the steward recalls you speaking with him animatedly before boarding. She flushed slightly. A flirtation, nothing more. He pursued me once, offered marriage even, but I refused. His wealth couldn't buy my heart. Her laugh was forced. Besides, I'm engaged now, to a man back in New York. Poirot detected the lie in her eyes, the way her hand twisted a ring that bore no diamond. As for her movements, she claimed to have retired early, disturbed only by the train's motion. I heard voices around 1 o'clock, arguing perhaps, but I stayed in bed. Dr. Elias Moreau approached next, his medical bag at his side like a faithful companion. He adjusted his spectacles, his demeanor professional yet evasive. As his physician, I can attest the Baron was in robust health, save for his heart. The tonic was my prescription, innocuous. Poirot leaned forward. And cyanide, doctor? You carry such things? Moreau stiffened. For research, yes, locked away, but anyone with knowledge could procure it. He glanced at Lady Isabella again, a look Poirot intercepted. I was in my compartment all night, reviewing papers for the conference. No witnesses? Poirot pressed. None needed for solitude, Moreau retorted, but his tremor returned, betraying nerves. Victor Lang was last, slouching into the chair with the air of a man accustomed to interrogation. His hollow cheeks and piercing eyes gave him a spectral quality in the lounge's light. Ask away, detective. I've nothing to hide. Your grudge against the Baron? Poirot inquired. Lang's lips curled. He bankrupted my father in Budapest during the crash of '29. Took our estate, left us destitute. I followed him to Paris, boarded this train to confront him, demand justice. His voice hardened. But murder? No. I wanted him alive, suffering as we did. Poirot noted the passion, the clenched jaw. And last night? Pacing the corridor, yes. I saw Thorpe leave the lounge angrily, heard the Baron lock his door. Then nothing. As the interrogations concluded, Poirot excused himself to inspect the evidence anew. In the Baron's compartment, now guarded by Miller, he examined the vial under a magnifying glass borrowed from the conductor. The label was pristine, but a faint scratch suggested tampering. The missing key troubled him. Had the door been locked from inside to suggest suicide, or relocked after the deed? Returning to the lounge, Poirot overheard snippets. Thorpe muttering to Miss Beaumont about damned foreigners, her reply sharp and dismissive. Lady Isabella conferred quietly with Moreau, their heads close, words inaudible but intimate. A search of luggage yielded clues. In Thorpe's valise, a bundle of letters detailed the failed investment, one threatening legal action. Miss Beaumont's trunk held a faded photograph of her with the Baron, arms linked, dated a year prior, contradicting her claim of scant acquaintance. Moreau's bag, when inspected with his reluctant consent, contained vials of various substances, including a cyanide ampoule with a seal recently broken. For experiments, he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. Lang's satchel revealed a newspaper clipping of the Baron's recent triumphs, annotated with bitter notes, yet no direct evidence linked any to the poison. As afternoon waned, the train ascended higher into the mountains, tunnels plunging the cars into brief darkness. Poirot paced, his mind weaving the threads. Footsteps in the corridor at midnight, reported by multiple witnesses, suggested a nocturnal visitor. A glove found near the compartment door, monogrammed with an I, pointed to Lady Isabella, but she claimed it lost days ago. Discrepancies mounted. Thorpe's alibi hinged on Fritz, whose loyalty might be bought. Moreau's familiarity with poisons made him suspect, yet his affair with the lady, suspected from their glances, provided motive for both. Miss Beaumont's spurned affection could fuel revenge, while Lang's vendetta burned brightest. Poirot gathered them once more. "The web is intricate," he declared. "Motives entwine like vines, but Hercule Poirot sees the pattern emerging." Whispers rippled through the group, accusations, denials. Outside, a storm brewed, thunder echoing the turmoil within. Zurich approached, but the killer's mask held firm, secrets buried deep in the gilded confines of the train. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The Orient Express wound its way deeper into the Swiss Alps, the tracks curving like serpents through narrow gorges where sunlight filtered in shafts, illuminating patches of evergreen forest and glistening streams far below. Inside the observation car, with its panoramic windows offering vistas of breathtaking grandeur, Hercule Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his egg-shaped head bowed in contemplation. The other passengers had been dismissed to their compartments under Herr Müller's vigilant eye, but the air hummed with the residue of their revelations, each motive a strand in the intricate web Poirot sought to untangle. "The surface yields much," he murmured to himself, "but it is the shadows of the past that conceal the truth. One must dig, like the archaeologist, to unearth the buried alliances." Returning to the Baron's sealed compartment, Poirot conducted a more exhaustive search, his gloved fingers probing the luggage with the delicacy of a surgeon. Amid the Baron's monogrammed shirts and leather-bound ledgers, he discovered a hidden compartment in the valise, a false bottom yielding a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The envelopes bore postmarks from Paris and Geneva, the handwriting feminine and flowing. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the contents, passionate declarations, rendezvous arranged in discreet cafes, signed with an E that could only belong to Dr. Elias Moreau. Armed with this evidence, Poirot summoned Lady Isabella to the lounge, where she arrived with a composure that bordered on defiance, her chin lifted, her eyes cool. "Madame," Poirot began, spreading the letters before her like cards in a game of patience. "These speak of an intimacy beyond the bounds of marriage. Deny it if you will, but the words betray you." She glanced at the papers, her color rising faintly. "An innocent correspondence," she protested, her voice steady, but her hands betraying a slight quiver as she reached for a cigarette. "Elias, Dr. Moreau, is an old friend from my youth in France. We shared memories, nothing more. Heinrich knew of it. He was jealous, but tolerant." Poirot tilted his head. Tolerant? Or perhaps using it as leverage? The Baron was not a man to share lightly. Lady Isabella exhaled smoke in a thin stream. "You twist everything. It was platonic. Letters of comfort during Heinrich's absences." Yet as Poirot pressed, She admitted to meetings in Paris. Always chaperoned, she insisted. Ask Elias, he will confirm. The detective nodded, dismissing her for the moment, but not before noting the desperation in her plea. Next, he confronted Dr. Moreau in his own compartment, where the physician sat amid scattered medical texts, his spectacles askew. Doctor, the letters, most compromising. An affair, non? Moreau blanched, his fingers drumming on his bag. Not as you imply. Isabella and I, we were engaged once, before she met the Baron. The letters revived old sentiments, but nothing physical occurred. He paused, glancing toward the door. The Baron discovered them, threatened to expose us unless I provided certain prescriptions. Poirot's mustache twitched. Prescriptions? For what? Toxins, for his research, he claimed, but I refused cyanide. It's too volatile. A search of Moreau's prescription pad, consented to under duress, revealed entries for arsenic and belladonna, dated weeks prior. Samples for my conference, Moreau explained hastily, not for harm. Leaving the doctor unsettled, Poirot turned his attention to Reginald Thorpe. The industrialist was found in the smoking car, puffing vigorously on a cigar, his face a map of worry lines. More questions, eh? I've told you all. Not quite, monsieur. Poirot produced documents from the Baron's luggage, financial records detailing insider trading schemes, with Thorpe's name prominently featured. The Baron blackmailed you over this, did he not? Your bankruptcy looms. These could ruin you utterly. Thorpe stubbed out his cigar, his bluster deflating. Blasted, yes. He had proof. Trades I made on his tips, illegal as the devil. Demanded repayment or he'd go to the authorities. I argued with him last night, offered what I could, but he wanted more. His voice dropped. I didn't kill him, Poirot. Poison's not my style. I'd have throttled the bounder. Poirot probed further. And your finances? How dire? Dire enough, Thorpe admitted. Factories closing, creditors at the door. But murder wouldn't solve it. His death might even accelerate the collapse if his estate calls in the debts. He produced a telegram from his pocket, dated the previous day. A desperate plea to London bankers for a loan, unanswered. As Thorpe departed, Miss Clara Beaumont was next, entering the lounge with a forced smile, her dress a splash of color against the somber mood. Monsieur Poirot, you're relentless. What more can I say? The truth, mademoiselle. You overheard a threat from Monsieur Lang the evening before the murder. Why withhold this? She hesitated, twisting her glove, a habit Poirot had noted earlier. I didn't want to accuse falsely, but yes, in the corridor after dinner, I heard Lang muttering to himself, "The Baron will pay tonight." It chilled me, but I thought it bluster. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And your own connection, the photograph in your trunk, with the Baron, intimate. Her facade cracked. A brief romance, yes. He promised marriage, then discarded me for Isabella's title. I was humiliated, but I've moved on. Revenge? I'd rather forget him. Under pressure, she confessed to wiring ahead to Zurich for a lawyer, intending to sue for breach of promise. But kill him? No, that would end any claim. Finally, Victor Lang was cornered in the observation car, where he stood gazing at the blurring peaks, his posture rigid. You persist, detective. What now? Your true identity, monsieur. You are not merely from Budapest. You are Victor Kessler, the Baron's disgraced cousin, non? Lang whirled, his eyes flashing. How did you... The family resemblance, faint but there. The photograph in your wallet. Your father and the Baron's brothers. You seek restitution for the inheritance he swindled. Lang sighed, slumping into a seat. Yes, Uncle divided the estate unevenly. Heinrich manipulated the will, left us penniless. I boarded this train to plead my case, not avenge it. Revenge profits nothing. Yet a search of Lang's belongings, conducted with Miller's assistance, yielded a worn book on toxicology, its pages marked at chapters on cyanide. Borrowed from Dr. Moreau's library in Paris, Lang claimed. I studied it to understand the Baron's research. He dabbled in chemicals for his bank vault protections. Poirot paced anew, the train's sway mirroring his thoughts. The snow-capped summits rushed by, indifferent to human folly. "The clues assemble, mes amis," he said aloud to the empty car. "Affairs, blackmail, spurned love, family betrayal. But the puzzle lacks its center." Re-examining the Baron's hand, clenched in death, Poirot pried open the fingers gently. A torn ticket stub emerged, not from the Orient Express, but a local Zurich tram, dated for the day of arrival. A secret rendezvous, he mused. With whom, and why conceal it? As evening approached, the train plunged into longer tunnels, darkness enveloping the cars like a shroud. Poirot gathered fragments, a hair on the Baron's pillow matching Miss Beaumont's blonde locks, a smudged ink stain on Thorpe's cuff resembling the prescription pad, a vial stopper in Lady Isabella's wastebasket. Whispers echoed in his mind, alliances shifting, past shadows lengthening. The doctor and the lady, bound by old love, Thorpe and Lang, united in financial ruin. Miss Beaumont, the wild card with her overheard threats. Dinner was served in tense silence, passengers eyeing one another over crystal and china. Poirot observed from afar, his tisane cooling untouched. A storm lashed the windows, thunder rumbling like accusations. Zurich drew nearer, but the past's grip tightened, promising revelations in the gloom. Chapter 6. The Twist in the Tunnel. The Orient Express approached the outskirts of Zurich, its gleaming cars slicing through the verdant shores of Lake Zurich, where the water mirrored the overcast sky like a sheet of polished steel. The air grew cooler, heavy with the promise of rain, as the train neared a notorious stretch of track. The Simon Tunnel, a mile-long burrow through the mountainside that plunged passengers into utter darkness. Hercule Poirot, sensing the climax of his investigation drawing near, assembled the suspects in the lounge car once more. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels seemed to quicken, echoing the accelerating pulse of revelation. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the tense silence as they took their seats. Lady Isabella, pale and composed, Dr. Moreau fidgeting with his cufflinks, Miss Clara Beaumont toying with her necklace, Reginald Thorpe nursing a tumbler of whiskey, and Victor Lang leaning against the wall with arms crossed. Herr Müller stood guard at the door, his expression grave. The pieces align. But first a discovery, cyanide residue on this glove. He produced the item from his pocket, monogrammed with a delicate CB. Miss Beaumont's eyes widened in alarm. "That's mine? But how? You accuse me of murder?" Poirot shook his head, his mustache quivering with a faint smile. "No, mademoiselle. It is a plant, a clever diversion. The residue is fresh, applied after the crime to implicate you. The true killer hoped to exploit your past with the Baron, your spurned affections, as a motive. But Hercule Poirot sees through such ruses." The American heiress exhaled in relief, though suspicion lingered in her gaze toward the others. Poirot turned to Thorpe, whose ruddy face had taken on a sheen of perspiration. "Monsieur Thorpe, your alibi, provided by the steward Fritz, crumbles. He confessed to me privately. You bribed him with 50 francs to swear you remained in your compartment. Why the deception? Thorpe slammed his glass down, spilling amber liquid across the table. All right, damn you. I left my room around 1 a.m., not to kill Kessler, but to meet a contact at the border station. Smuggling documents, nothing more. My businesses are failing. I needed leverage. He produced a crumpled envelope from his coat. See? Trade secrets, not poison. Poirot examined the papers briefly. Blueprints for machinery, innocuous enough. And yet your motive weakens further. I have learned from the Baron's solicitor, via telegram to the conductor. His will names you as a beneficiary, a token for past partnerships. His death profits you naught. In fact, it invites scrutiny of your dealings. Thorpe blinked, surprise etching his features. Beneficiary? I had no idea. Then why? Precisely, Poirot interjected. The killer wished us to believe otherwise. As the train's whistle pierced the air, signaling the tunnel's approach, shadows lengthened in the car. The landscape outside dimmed, the lake's gleam fading as rocky walls closed in. Poirot pivoted to Dr. Moreau, whose composure had eroded, his hands now visibly shaking. Doctor, your role deepens. You admitted prescribing toxins, but the cyanide ampule in your bag, its seal broken. Explain. Moreau collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. It was for Heinrich himself. He approached me weeks ago, despondent over his health and Isabella's distance. He begged for a merciful end, a suicide pact, he called it, though I refused to join. I provided the cyanide reluctantly, swearing him to secrecy. But last night, he must have used it, or someone forced it upon him. Lady Isabella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A pact? Heinrich? Suicidal? Impossible. But as Moreau continued, detailing furtive meetings in Paris, where the Baron confessed his fears of ruin and betrayal, her facade shattered. She swayed, her eyes rolling back in a faint, collapsing gracefully onto the divan. Miss Beaumont rushed to her side with smelling salts, while Moreau hovered, his concern genuine. Her infidelity thwarted his plan. Moreau whispered hoarsely. He discovered our letters, confronted me, but I swear, I didn't administer the dose. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Your affection for Madame is clear, Doctor, but love can blind, or motivate protection. The train plunged into the tunnel then, darkness swallowing the cars in an instant. Gasps echoed as the lights flickered once before steadying to a dim glow from the emergency lamps. The world outside vanished, replaced by the oppressive roar of echoes against stone walls. In this void, secrets seemed amplified, the moral obscurity aboard mirroring the physical blackout. Victor Lang stepped forward, his voice steady amid the din. Enough shadows. I have proof of my innocence. He unfolded a telegram from his satchel, handed it to Poirot. The detective read aloud by faint light. From Zurich notary, reconciliation meeting scheduled upon arrival. Baron requests presence for estate amendment. Signed, legal counsel. Lang nodded. He wired me in Paris, offered to restore part of the inheritance. I came not for revenge, but resolution. Why kill him before the Amans? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the gloom. Indeed, monsieur, the truth emerges from the lies, like light at tunnel's end. He paced the swaying car, the train's motion jostling the group. Consider the clues anew, the torn tram ticket in the Baron's hand, for a Zurich meeting, perhaps with you, Lang, or another. The footsteps at midnight, heard by all yet claimed by none. The vial, tampered not with poison added to tonic, but replaced entirely. Lady Isabella stirred, reviving with a moan. Replaced? But who? Poirot halted before her. One who knew his habits intimately, one with access to Moreau's supplies and motive to inherit swiftly before suicides or reconciliations altered the will. The tunnel's end approached, a pinprick of light growing ahead. Accusations flew in the darkness. Thorpe blamed Moreau's jealousy. Miss Beaumont pointed to Lang's book on poisons. Moreau defended his pact as mercy. But Poirot raised a hand. Patience. The twist reveals itself. He revealed a final clue. A pendant from Lady Isabella's necklace, found wedged under the berth. A secret compartment within, residue of cyanide lining its hollow. Madame, your jewels conceal more than beauty. She paled further. I used it for perfumes, nothing sinister. The light burst upon them as the train emerged, Zurich's spires visible in the distance. Poirot's gaze softened. Not yet the denouement, but close. Suspicions shift, alliances fracture, the killer trembles. The group dispersed uneasily, the tunnels twist, leaving them disoriented. Rain pattered against the windows, washing the landscape in gray. Poirot retired to his compartment, his gray cells ablaze. Telegrams to Zurich police awaited, evidence mounted. The Baron's death, once a silent scream, now roared with impending justice. As the train slowed toward the station, Poirot twisted his mustache. The lies unravel. Soon, the revelation. Chapter 7. The Revelation at Zurich. The Orient Express eased into Zurich's Grand Hauptbahnhof with a final sigh of steam, the platform bustling with porters, travelers, and a contingent of Swiss police, their uniforms crisp and their expressions stern. Word of the murder had preceded the train via telegram, and uniformed officers swarmed the cars, securing the scene with efficient precision. Hercule Poirot, stepping down onto the solid ground, felt the shift from the train's confined world to the open expanse of the station, where justice could now unfold without the constraints of motion. He adjusted his hat against the brisk alpine breeze and directed the suspects to the ornate waiting room, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings and marble floors that echoed like a courtroom. The group assembled around a long oak table, the police forming a silent perimeter. Lady Isabella sat rigidly, her veil drawn low. Dr. Moreau beside her, protective yet defeated. Miss Clara Beaumont fidgeted with her handbag. Reginald Thorpe mopped his brow with a handkerchief. Victor Lang stood apart, his gaze distant. Herr Müller, relieved of his duties, lingered as a witness, while Fritz, the steward, hovered nervously in the background. Poirot positioned himself at the head of the table, his small stature belying the commanding presence that filled the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice resonant and measured, "we have journeyed through darkness, tunnels of stone and of the soul. Now, in the light of Zurich, the truth emerges. The Baron Heinrich von Kessler did not die by his own hand, nor by accident. It was murder, calculated and cold, designed not merely for death, but for the ruin of reputations and the securing of fortunes." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, his green eyes scanning each face for the telltale flicker of guilt. "Let us reconstruct." The Baron retired with his tonic, a vial provided by Dr. Moreau. But it was no suicide pact thwarted. The cyanide was added surreptitiously during a late-night visit. The door locked from inside? A ruse. The key was replaced after the deed. Footsteps heard by Miss Beaumont and others confirm an intruder. Thorpe leaned forward, his voice gruff. "Get to it, man. Who did it?" Poirot raised a hand. Patience, monsieur. Motives we have in abundance. Your blackmail, Dr. Moreau's affair, Miss Beaumont's rejection, Monsieur Lang's disinheritance, Lady Isabella's entrapment in a loveless union. But clues point unerringly. He turned to Victor Lang. You, monsieur, sought reconciliation. The telegram proves it. Your presence was for amends, not vengeance. The toxicology book? Mere curiosity, borrowed innocently. Lang nodded, relief softening his features. Mr. Thorpe, Poirot continued, your smuggling and bribes were distractions, but the Baron's will favored you. A small bequest to salve old wounds. Murder would invite audits, exposing your schemes further. Thorpe grunted in agreement, sinking back. Miss Beaumont, the planted glove was to frame you, exploiting your past romance. But your lawsuit required the Baron alive. Death nullified your claim. She smiled faintly, her tension easing. Dr. Moreau, Poirot said, his tone softening. Your pact was real, born of compassion for a despairing man. The affair with Madame? A rekindled flame, but not the spark for murder. You provided the means, yet lacked the will. Your hands heal, not harm. Moreau bowed his head, murmuring thanks. All eyes turned to Lady Isabella, who had grown still as a statue, her veil unable to hide the pallor of her cheeks. Madame, Poirot addressed her directly. You feigned devotion, but chafed under the Baron's control, his jealousy, his wealth that bound you like chains. The letters to Moreau were a diversion, yes, but also a cry for freedom. You visited his compartment that night under pretense of reconciliation and substituted the tonic with the poisoned vial, using the cyanide from the doctor's bag, accessed through your intimacy. But the affair was innocent, she cried, her voice cracking for the first time, echoing in the vast room. Poirot shook his head. Innocent? Perhaps at first, but the motive runs deeper. Inheritance. The Baron's will left everything to you, provided no scandal erupted. His suicide pact threatened that. Self-inflicted death might void the estate under Swiss law. Reconciliation with Lang could dilute your share. You acted to secure it all, freedom and fortune. Evidence mounted as Poirot laid it out. The torn tram ticket stub in the Baron's hand. From her own pocket, misplaced in haste during the visit. Intended for a post-murder rendezvous with a lover in Zurich, perhaps Moreau himself. The pendant in her sapphire necklace, a family heirloom with a hidden compartment, bore traces of cyanide, used to transport the toxin undetected. Fritz, under gentle questioning, recalled seeing her slip into the compartment around midnight, carrying a small case. The glove plant? Her attempt to shift blame, knowing Miss Beaumont's enmity. Overwhelmed, Lady Isabella's elegance dissolved. She buried her face in her hands, sobs racking her frame. He was a tyrant, she confessed brokenly. Suffocating me with suspicion, controlling every franc. Elias offered escape, but Heinrich discovered us. I couldn't let him destroy everything. The pact would have left me penniless, disgraced. I poured the cyanide into his tonic, watched him drink. It was quick. The police stepped forward, gently but firmly leading her away in handcuffs. Moreau reached out, his face etched with sorrow, but she turned from him, her head high in defeat. Poirot sighed, watching the scene unfold. The little gray cells prevail once more. Human nature, greed cloaked in love, freedom sought through chains of death. It is tragic, yet justice is served. As the group dispersed, the innocent to their lives, the authorities to their duties, Poirot stepped out into the Swiss sunshine, the lake sparkling beyond the station. He twisted the ends of his magnificent mustache, a small smile playing on his lips. The Alps stood sentinel, eternal and unmoved, as the detective hailed a cab, his mind already turning to the next enigma.